Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my car. It's been a little while since I've done a drive and gab kind of an episode. Well, right now I am in my car on the way to St. Louis, Missouri, driving from Kansas City. It's about a 3.5 hour long drive. I will not be talking to you the whole time. I'm going to interview Apollo 5, one of the professional vocal ensembles presented by the Voces 8 Foundation. They're on tour in the United States, and St. Louis is close enough for me to drive over there, and we're going to have the whole group on the podcast. So I'm excited about that. And doing it also the week of the 6th anniversary of this show. The 6th birthday is February 18th, which is coming up this week. And that's just such a remarkable thing. And I just am going to reflect a little bit on that with you, if that's okay. Some of you listening or watching are new to the show and probably, to be honest, are missing a lot of context. In a lot of ways, this show has become a story. It's its own story. There are the stories of the guests. There are the stories of the issues that we've discussed. There's the story of pedagogies that have been presented, concepts that we've tried, reports back from trying things. It's really been a dialogue that's been going on for 6 years with the people who choose to engage in it. And I think that's actually fantastic. So a lot of ways that the show is different than I anticipated 6 years ago that it would be. And I will say transparently that I did believe very strongly from the very beginning that I could turn this show into a business. And what I mean by that, of course, is a show that is of value to people to the point where they would be willing to pay for it. And that would be from users going to Patreon or Substack and chipping in monthly just voluntarily because they find the show so valuable, but also advertisers would want to pay me to be able to get their message out because I believed very strongly, even before the show had even aired, that this would turn into something. And the reason I believed that is because I saw a gap in the marketplace. I saw a gap in conversations about the way we teach and how we teach that didn't just stick at the surface. They didn't just show up with a quick, 7 easy steps to make your choir perfect or whatever. Because the reality is that that's never going to work. Like, that is not how any of this works. And so what we've been doing here is we've been presenting nuanced, in-depth conversations that really, to keep up with them, you'd have to go back a long ways to gather context. And I also recognize that not everyone is willing or interested in doing that. And so it's been an interesting, I guess you could say, needle to thread, where I'm trying to present now going into year 7, trying to present episodes that would be of value to someone who's never listened to this show before, right? Because I do want to bring in new people, always looking for new audience members. And that's why I ask for you to share and start conversations on the threads on social media. Ask questions, share the episode with your friends, those types of things, because we are still trying to find new people who have never listened before. And that's one part of the needle, while on the other side of that needle, so to speak, is I'm trying to add to conversations that have already occurred in the past. So, which is, over the years, I've made adjustments to the way the website organizes all of our episodes. The main topics that really drive lots of engagement from colleagues, from specifically choir colleagues, are the music literacy episodes and the vocal pedagogy episodes. So they each have their own home on the website. So if you go to choralosophy.com/music literacy, that's just where I put links to every episode that we've ever done that helps people learn how to read good. Okay. And so that's all in one place, because that is something that people tend to come back to because they are how to do stuff in class. And so sometimes you come back and listen to it multiple times because you're still trying to perfect those activities in your class. Same thing with the vocal pedagogy episodes. It's impossible to just remember all of it. So people come back to those. Now, as far as the other topics that get covered on the show, whether it be the social justice topics, whether it be just philosophical things about programming and how do we choose our music, I don't have special homes for those, but it's very easy still to go. I prefer the search feature on YouTube just because it's Google and it makes it easy to search the show by topic, and you can go find certain guests from the past just by searching Choralosophy and then the name of the guest, or you can search Choralosophy and then keywords for different topics that you might be looking for, because now we are talking about approaching 300 total episodes and posts over that 6-year span, which means that it is, I can't think of a bigger free online professional development library out there that is independent outside of organizations and stuff that have an advantage in that way. But ultimately, this show started with the knowledge that there is a need for this kind of thing, that there is a need for professional development that you can just put in your pocket and go with, that you can listen on your drive to school, you can watch on during your plan period when you're trying to figure out that next lesson plan, etc. And so that's why the show is here. And yes, over that 6 years, we have also kind of grown into several other reasons to be, which is that now the way I think of it is I've built this platform that can reach thousands of people with the click of a button. And so that is also part of the mission, is to have the conversations that I see, and this is my show, it's a sole proprietorship, I do that, there's no committee, no guardrails, I just decide that I think this is an important conversation. And sometimes the audience agrees with me, and it becomes a very productive conversation. Sometimes the audience, and this is the way I find it, that the audience doesn't agree with me that it's an important conversation because nobody listens to that episode. And then I learn from that and I adjust to that based on a kind of a dance, you could say, between me and you and the audience. Ultimately, the way I see my job is that I built this program, I built this platform. I don't have a platform. I haven't been given a platform. I built it. I like to remind people too, I built it without anybody's help. There was no organization that sat over my shoulder and made sure that it was going to go well. I had to convince the advertisers. When I started this show, there was no music education industry MO for companies to pay for podcast advertising. For the most part, and actually it still happens, people ask to advertise stuff on here for free because they don't understand that that's not how it works, that this is like a real podcast where enough people listen that you can charge for advertising. And so it's all these things didn't exist in 2019. Ryan Guth, of course, had Choir Ninja that he had done for a while and had gotten to that level, but then stopped. So when the show started in 2019, it really was the only one that was trying to do it this way. In a lot of ways, we're still the only one that is running the show in the way that we are doing, which is that it is an online business. It's a content creation one-stop shop for as many music education related, current events related conversations that I believe, rightly or wrongly, are relevant to the work that we do as music educators. And so it's also been interesting to find over these years that it's not just music educators that listen, which I think is why the show is able to be in that category of kind of the top 1.5% of all podcasts in the world, which is, I always, again, like to remind people, sounds really impressive. It's not as impressive as it sounds. The gap between 1.5% and the 0.1% of podcasts, the daily and some of those really famous ones that have millions and millions of listeners, that's a huge gap. To be in the top 1.5%, you really need to be a regular producer of podcasts over a long period of time and be in the neighborhood of 3,000 to 5,000 people that listen regularly. And that is actually a lot harder than it sounds, but it's not like Joe Rogan of the Choir Podcast, as some people have called me. It's not that level, right? So we have a little niche audience, but it's not just music educators. I've found that people who just like to sing listen to this show. I've found that a surprising number of choir students listen to this show. Music education majors, of course. I've also find that parents of kids who like choir listen to this show, which is very interesting. And one story I got about that was simply that, hey, my kid is into choir and they're super into it, and I didn't know really anything about choir because I didn't sing as a kid, and so I was trying to educate myself so that I knew how to talk to my kid about their passion, which was choir at their school. And they found my show. A parent of a student found my show and just found it interesting, found the conversations interesting. They found that they were learning, of course, more about what their students were facing in their choir classes. And so it's just been a really, really amazing journey. And I appreciate everyone who listens, engages in conversation, whether they agree with me or not. I think I probably, on average, probably every episode, almost every episode, I try to figure out a way to work into the conversation the encouragement that you're allowed to disagree with stuff. And what's amazing to me about that, and I think maybe this is just my personality, what makes me weird, is that so few people these days agree with that statement, which is that it's just okay. It's okay to disagree. I can say a thing about what I notice about the world, and you can say, you know what? I wouldn't say it that way, or I don't see that. That is not how I see it. And on my show, I try to make that feel safe for the guest. Whether it works or not, I guess would depend on the guest. But what I've found is that it doesn't lead to arguments. It actually, by opening the door for that disagreement, it almost shuts the argument down before it starts. In other words, if you make space, if you make safe the idea that we can disagree, then the little statement that comes back of disagreement doesn't feel like an attack. But it takes two in a conversation to open that door. Of course, it starts with one, right? One person's got to start that. And since I'm the host of the show, then I start that. That's what I try to do. And that is also true on social media. So if you come onto a post of mine that you disagree with, you don't need to apologize for disagreeing. There are polite ways to disagree. Of course, part of that is that you assume that I have my opinion based on my life experience and my desire to truly do what's best for people and kids under my care and what's best for the world, etc. And I will assume that about you, even if I disagree with your opinion. And there are ways to start the disagreement that are in line with that. And so you don't ever have to say, like, oh, I'm sorry to disagree. I'm sorry to disagree here. I get that a lot. You don't have to say it. Don't apologize. Just politely say where you see something differently than I do. Because here's the thing. We learn from each other in that scenario. And that's what the podcast conversations have been based on too, is the idea that we learn in that scenario. We learn really, really well, and our students do too, in the scenario where it's safe to engage with and try on back and forth different ideas, whether it be different ideas about how to learn the music, about how to sing the phrase, about what dynamics to choose, which syllables to emphasize. All of that kind of stuff is we are modeling for kids in a choir classroom what true pluralism in society can look like. And so in a lot of ways, this show, as I see it, has become, not necessarily intended to be from the beginning, but has become in 6 years a microcosm of choir. And choir is a microcosm of society. And I believe that's why one of the reasons that it's so valuable in schools. And of course, we've talked recently on the show about how in some countries around the world, it's not a part of school. Most countries around the world, it's not a part of school. And how fortunate we are here in the United States to have that, to even to be a choir teacher for a living. As you heard me talk about it with Javiera in a recent episode from Chile, talking about how just non-existent even that idea is in her country, that somebody could just be a school choir teacher and have that be their job, and they get full-time salary and benefits. Even though we then complain about the salary and benefits, have some perspective. We are so fortunate. We are so fortunate to get to have this robust choral-specific music education landscape in the United States, and yet we still have people saying that we are too focused on choir, and we need to release the reins from choir and let there be other types of music education. I'm like, we are an enclave, you guys. We are on the top of a mountain with a moat around us of countries that even have our job. And so we have an ACDA, for example, that is a professional organization for 20,000 something choir directors, most of whom are choir directors for a living. And that is so incredibly lucky, because choral music is this will be a hot take. Choral music is the most inclusive form of music education. You can get a whole bunch of kids in the room. You can teach them a lot about, not everything. You can't teach them everything, but you can teach them a very large number of musical concepts and develop their personal, individual musicianship while getting lots of kids in the room and doing it for almost free. Right? Your sight reading factory membership, you got to have that, but that's $35 a year. Let's say you've got 50 kids. That's less than $1 a kid compared to a band or an orchestra where the instruments cost thousands of dollars. We can get to almost everybody who wants to do music. And until somebody shows me a more inclusive version of of music education that reaches a higher number of kids for less money, then I would be all ears. But we are so lucky to have these professions, and I very strongly believe that we should advocate for them, which is what we do here on the show. We should unapologetically be champions of choral music education, and we should be looking to grow it, expand it, preach it from the mountaintop, all of those things, because it is not something we should take for granted, especially when you look around the world and see how rare we are, how much of an enclave we are. So that's what we're going to keep doing here on the show. We're going to keep pushing the envelope. We're not going to make attempts to please everybody. We're not going to make attempts to have safe, sanitized, sanitary conversations where no one is offended. We are going to press. We're going to press on ideas until we find the ones we like, because that's what it means to think. We're going to think. We're going to think out loud. We're going to think off the cuff. Sometimes we will say things that a year or two later, we wish we hadn't said. It's happened to me a lot of times. I think probably my most famous example is when I came on and I did my ripping off the Band-Aid episode about how you shouldn't play notes for kids on the piano in choir class, which I stand by. But what I didn't do a good enough job in that episode of is making it clear that I understand that there are contexts to all of those things, where the context for the best pedagogy versus the pedagogy that you use in a pinch or whatever are not possible. And like, what if I only see my kids for an hour a week because it's an elementary school before school choir or whatever? Music literacy is not really something I have time to do. Those types of responses came in, and I looked back at that episode and I thought, you know what, I don't think I said anything that was pedagogically incorrect in episode 18 early on in the show, but as years have gone by, I wish that I had made more clear that I understand that not everybody's situation is different. Example, just this most recent episode with Cindy Ellis talking about how she has 90 minutes a day with kids. She can do all kinds of stuff: music theory, dictation, ear training, composition, improvisation, and she can build those in because she has literally twice as much time with kids every day than I do. Right? So that would be another example. It would be an error for Cindy to say every choir teacher should do all of the things I do in 90 minutes a day, because then I would look at it and go, but I only have 44 minutes a day, right? And I knew those things. I knew that it wasn't this. Not everybody's situation was the same, but I didn't do a very good job in that early episode. I was new to podcasting too. I didn't do a very good job in that early episode of just making it clear that I get that everybody's minutes is different and the things that you're going to be able to accomplish are different. But the pedagogical concepts are universal, because the human brain is universal, right? We all have different learning preferences, but the mechanisms with which we learn are pretty darn much the same. And so we should be learning a pedagogy that is kind of a first principle. Like, from first principles, we want to establish kids' ability to hear music in their head so that they can sing it fluently, so that they can sing with freedom and lack of hesitation and an efficient vocal mechanism. That should be like our main job. And then with the time that we have, we then can add on cherries on top. And I do believe that is the way we should be looking at it, because we are the only chance that they're going to have to do those things, to learn those things in many, many cases. So that is kind of what we've been trying to accomplish here. I think I'll leave you with the idea that in the future, as the show progresses, because I plan to stick around. I plan to keep doing this, much to the chagrin of several colleagues who wish that I would stop, and they wish that I would shut up, and that's fine. But I'm not going to do that. And so what we're going to do going forward is I'm going to continue to encourage people to listen for context before developing strong opinions about what we're talking about and what we're doing here on this show. Because if you don't, you're talking out of your ass. And so that will continue to be something that I hold people to when they try to engage online. But also I encourage people to look back through the podcast feed. Find times when you are doing the dishes or going for a walk or going to the gym or whatever, where you can catch up on some of the conversations on topics that you are passionate about if you are newer to the show. Now, if you've been around since the beginning, my goodness, we are now an elite club of people who have been listening to this show since February of 2019. So happy birthday to the show, and thank you all for being a part of it in whatever way you have, whether it be using the promo codes at Sight Reading Factory, mymusicfolders.com, Graphite, Endeavor, 3 Minute Theory. Every time you use those promo codes, that is a huge help to me, because that's how I pay my bills. For the people who subscribe $3 to all the way up to $20 a month at Patreon or Substack, that is also how the bills get paid. The more years that the show goes, the more expensive web hosting becomes for me. So these types of things are costs for the business. So we do this all together. No one is doing this for us. No one is creating this platform other than me talking and you engaging. Those things stop, and people stop wanting to come and talk with me about stuff, then all of it goes away. So I'd encourage you to continue with that engagement, and we will hopefully be talking about the 12th anniversary of the show 6 years from now. See you later.